The next topic is looking at sensitivity, and the component of the sensitivity I'm going to focus on in real estate is the maximum bid price of land. And that's because in the buying and selling of land, there's actually an informal bidding process. Okay, the seller decides how much he thinks his land or his real estate is worth based on market and other information that's available. The buyer has to decide how much it's worth to himself or herself. And when you get in there and you say, oh, I like this land, or if you want to say a house, this house is selling at $160,000, you have to decide how much you're willing to pay for it. Where do you start the bidding? If you say $100,000 and that's extremely under market, the seller won't even respond back to you. They may never respond back to you. They may get mad at you and never deal with you again. So you got to be in the ballpark. But at the same time, you don't want to tip your hand and give it all away. You want to start at a level a little under and know but exactly how much you're willing to go. You don't want to get caught up in the game so that you end up so determined to get that property that you're willing to pay anything for it, ultimately paying more than is justified by the numbers. Because this is an agricultural class, I'm going to show you how to do this from the prospect of farmland. But this can be done for any type of real estate investment. The question then is, what is the most you can pay for an acre of land and still be profitable, or a good investment for you based on your required return to investments? And you can see it's easy. You just set the net present value equal to 0 and solve for the cost. Now, I'm going to give you an approximation, but I'll be careful here because if you did this on an exam, I'd say it's an approximation and you'd lose most of the points. But it's also a quick and dirty way to answer that question. If the cost right now is $500 and you have a positive net present value of $39,000, approximately, what's the most you can pay for this land? You could pay about $540. Because if this was $540, okay, then what would this be approximately? 0, right? That's approximately. Now you'll see in a minute why it's only an approximation. This is our formula that we used to calculate the net present value to come up with that number. This is the symbolic representation of how we calculated the net present value for land. This isn't anything new. This is how we started. Notice that the initial cost shows up in, obviously, the first component. It also shows up, as you can see, in the fourth component in calculating the after-tax terminal value, because the amount of gain or loss depends on what we pay for it, which then helps determine the tax adjustment. So again, the tax code makes this very simple problem more complicated. So here's our problem. We lay out the net present value. We set the net present value to 0. We know that this present value of after-tax net returns, if you look at your chart, on the right-hand side of that particular component, if you flip it your page, you'll see that that second component, the present value, is 95.56. You should be able to spot that number. Also remember that the terminal value was $578.81. That's something we calculated. The discount rate we determined was 8.5%. The life of this investment was 3 years. And now we have to calculate the C's. So now this just becomes an algebraic problem. So we multiply through all the parentheses and brackets, combine the terms, separate out the C, and it comes out to 544.83. Now our approximation was what? Our approximation was $540. The actual was $544. Now knowing the approximation is good on an exam, right? Because you can look at the approximation, and if your true answer isn't close to that, you can say what? Dang, I screwed up. Go back and figure it out. Okay, so the maximum bid price of land is $544.83 per acre. And since you can buy that at $500 an acre, very likely he's going to start the bidding at 500, and if he really wants that land, he might even bid up a little higher. You say, oh, no way. I can tell you in real estate that sometimes that actually happens. If there's a list price of a house of $260,000 and it becomes apparent that the houses are selling, there's people that sometimes will offer $265. They'll go over the price if they want that property.